Well, I guess growing up in Wisconsin, I've been to a lot of farms throughout my life, but the first time I really worked on a farm was when Spencer and I went out to Potter Valley in, I think it was like 2017, and we didn't really know what to expect. We found a host on a website called Workaway, which is basically all these different people who have any odd job, whether it's like babysitting their kids or refinishing, a home, remodeling or something. So we found this farm who was doing a biodiverse vegetable garden for markets and pigs. And we were like, well, this seems like a fun thing. Let's try something new. We had just tried living outside of LA for a little while and both realized very quickly we weren't city people, which we had to try to learn. And so we found ourselves on this farm in Potter Valley, and I mean, just the first day walking around there and seeing that they were, like, I didn't know what to expect, but that they were growing like everything you could grow. This person who has this farm is like doing it with quite minimal means, I guess, compared to what other people do. But he was very dedicated to basically providing local organic produce to especially his local community and then some of the nearby surrounding communities during like the peak of the season. So the day we got to the farm in Potter Valley, or maybe the week, I guess, of, Ben was saying like, oh, we're going to get bees here. So I'm like, okay, somebody here probably kind of knows what they're doing. And he was like, well, everyone's a little bit afraid of bees. Would you do it, Hannah? And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess, because I've never really been afraid of bees. So, but I had never been this upfront with bees. And so, I just kind of started watching some YouTube videos and like picked up the gear from a beekeeper in town. A lot of information to share, and so did the person who I picked up the package of bees from to get the hive started. And so I brought them home that night and just got started there. And that was my first experience with anything related to bees, and it was definitely a crash course. And so one of the big projects that I helped with while we were there, besides growing the vegetables and fruits and doing farmers markets, was building a farm stand that basically had the beginnings of it were there when we got there, but it hadn't yet been an active farm stand. And so that was something that was built on the property where the food was being grown. And the farm had no sign. Like when we got there, they didn't have any way of identifying whose stand it was at the market. So like when Spencer and I started going for Ben is the farmer, and he had always done his markets himself. When Spencer and I came was like kind of the beginning of him having people who were working on the farm go to the markets more often. And so we realized, like, oh, people don't know who we are because there's no way to recognize, they recognize him, but not necessarily us. So we've made, like, these fun signs for the farm that went to the market and then transferred into the farm market stand. And the farm is called Soul Shaker Acres. And so the farm stand kind of came to life while we were there, and we just put a little bit of everything that we were growing out there. So when we were on the farm, it was basically very much like a community. There was a lot of people living there. Most people who worked there lived there in anything, from like a tent to a van to, there was a couple of kind of like, you could call them tiny homes built on the back of a truck bed or something. So very tiny, not in the sense that you see on like HGTV or whatever, but, and we had a big outdoor kitchen. That was where we cooked all of our food. And so when we were working there, and everyone who was working there was working to some extent for room and board, there was, opportunities to work more and then make some income, but mostly it was an exchange. which also was very cool, kind of like a barter, more of a barter economy, and just kind of about working together and bringing what you bring to the table was very much how the farm worked. And so that's something I really liked about it, was kind of being on a scale where you're able to take care of yourself and the people who are working, with you, alongside you. And I think seeing the way that people could live in a community like that and all share responsibilities to make so much happen. I mean, there was a time when we moved a 1,500-pound smoker that when I was looking at it, I'm like, there's no way we're going to be able to move this thing. And all together we did it. So everything was just kind of this effort where maybe the task would look unapproachable, but because there was such a great group of people willing to work together, a lot of really cool things happened. So this is my smoker. I'm lighting some basically just brush in there to create the beginning of a little, not a fire, but kind of like embers. And this kind of helps distract the bees or confuse them. Basically the smell of the smoke makes them confused and not as able to communicate with one another. So it makes them a little calmer when you're going to open a hive. So this is what a frame of capped honey looks like. And you can see, so down here the bees started forming some comb that I'm actually going to scrape off. That is just, they sometimes build around the frames, but both sides is capped honey. And I don't really filter or process mine very much. I pretty often leave it with the comb and just scoop it into jars from the frame, and I don't pasteurize it at all. So I think that adds a lot to the taste. I think with a lot of things, they just taste really different after they've been pasteurized. So that's some of the extra comb, and there's some honey coming out there. So I have these little jars, and I basically sometimes I strain it, especially I give honey as a gift, and so not everyone likes comb, but I like comb. So I'm just going to go ahead and scoop it like this. And it gets a little messy. I would probably normally lay down some paper, or not paper, paper bags, I guess, underneath this, but we're just going for it today. So honey has different colors kind of based on what the bees have been feeding on and what kind of season it is that they were kind of creating the honey. And this honey I'm noticing is quite clear, quite light. It's my first time taking honey from these bees, so it's actually kind of interesting to notice that compared to where I kept them last year on a farm in the country versus being here in town, it's definitely a different kind of color to the lighter color that I'm noticing in the honey. So, for this honey, I left the comb in there to harvest them together, and the comb is edible, so, you can spread it on toast or whatever. But sometimes I separate the comb, and so this is basically this comb, which is beeswax, balled up here, and I'm saving it to process into candles or some chapstick in the future when I get around to it. So I set up a greenhouse to basically extend the growing season, because in Wisconsin, we have not the longest growing season. So my tomatoes I planted in here in beginning of May. So they've been pretty productive over the last month or so, and I've started harvesting. So in my greenhouse I have some perennial herbs like rosemary and sage. Yeah, and then I have cucumbers that are trellising all over the place. They need some water. And then, the rosemary's here. The sage is kind of in the back getting lost in cucumbers. And my tomatoes are intercropped here with basil. So I've had lots of tomatoes. My goal for next year is to kind of grow enough that we're kind of canning a lot that we're going to use over the course of winter. So this season, I've mostly been giving them away, and we've been keeping up with eating them. But hopefully, my goal is to basically grow towards as much of our food production happening in our backyard as possible. And hopefully that means like a bigger backyard eventually, but we have plenty of space to work with as we're getting started here. Yeah, the chickens have a layer feed that they're always having access to, but I have this little treat that they really like, which is a mixture of some dried mealyworms and sunflower seeds and oats and corn. And I think there's some flax seeds in there as well. So this is something they really like, as well as garden scraps. They really like squash and cucumbers. They get a lot of cucumbers. I gave them one of the watermelons that I harvested too early too. So yeah, the calcium is something they eat to make sure that their shells are nice and strong when they lay eggs. And they eat a lot of it. And pretty much because of the fact that like the way chickens have been sort of bred to be such high egg producers, that's kind of why they need the calcium supplement that they might not need before they were so domesticated or bred for egg production. So there's a few eggs in their coop this morning. I try to check every day in the morning and pick them up. And normally, so they've started laying pretty recently. Oh, and I put these fake eggs in here that helped them kind of know where they should lay their eggs. They kind of help them. They want to lay eggs in a group. It's called a clutch, I think. So by putting these fake eggs in here, it helped them kind of start laying them all in one area where I could always find them. So basically this spot here is kind of our first step towards, well, for me, it's my first time having my own spot to work on these things that I'm interested in, like having backyard chickens and a bigger garden, and beat my bees here. But it's quite simple to create food sources in your backyard if it's something you are interested in doing. Everything is on YouTube. I use YouTube for everything from fixing my radiator to learning how to keep bees. So I really love the University of YouTube. And, we have just a third of an acre here that I'm hoping to basically transform into like a food paradise and a pollinator paradise over the next few years. And so, yeah, I guess that's really all that I have to say. I don't know.